Human economic systems are similar to natural systems. I mean, we're natural, we're organisms, we're animals. And so we had to have a continual influx of energy to maintain ourselves, maintain our cultures. Early economists, in one group, for example, called the physiocrats, Quenet and others who are writing in 1750 in France especially, and they thought all value came from the land. Energy came from the sun and was captured by forests and by agriculture, fed to animals and so forth, so it was all about the land. More land you had, like in Jane Austen novels, the more land you had, the more wealth you had. Then the classical economists, Adam Smith and up to Karl Marx, thought that value came from labor. People concentrated in factories with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, physically putting things together. Neoclassical economists today, Solow, for example, in the 1950s wrote about this, thought that value came from capital. We were using oil, basically, to run the economy, to make things, and we did that with machines, which are capital. So each of them are actually talking about the energy sources of their time. But they didn't have this synthetic overview to understand they're all about energy. Here's a dollar. A dollar's worth a whole lot less than when I was doing a paper route as a kid. Money used to be backed by gold, and it's thought that gold is some kind of standard of value. But when the Spaniards brought back the gold from the New World to the Old World, they doubled, almost tripled the amount of gold in the Old World, but they halved its value. The energy at that time that was running the economy, solar energy that was running agriculture and forestry that was growing the fuel and the energy of the people to chop the food and the draft animals to plow the land, whatever, all of that energy had not changed. That's true today. This should say on it, pay to the bearer 5 megajoules of energy, which is, half a coffee cup's worth of oil. That's about 5 megajoules there, more or less. If you buy a bagel, how does that bagel get there? Well, here's what happens. Fertilizer is put in a bag and barged up the Mississippi River using diesel and then taken to farmers with diesel trucks and spread on the ground with diesel tractors. Then wheat is harvested using diesel and then using oil or electricity ground up, put in a bag, put on a train, shipped across from Nebraska, I suppose, to Oregon or New York City as a bag of flour, and then mixed using energy in the baker's shop and put into an oven fired with natural gas. In other words, there's all these energy steps. No energy, no bagel. No energy, no economy. And that applies everywhere you look. So for every dollar you spend, that's 5 megajoules or half a coffee cup's worth of oil. And if you buy a new car, well, you think about it. Quite a lot of energy that goes in there. We have to use the oil that we use wisely. The next 50 years is going to be really, really difficult because we're going to have to replace the cheap and abundant oil and gas with something else, which will be very energy intensive to do. As you mine more and more of either oil or coal or copper or 100 other materials that we use, we always use the best stuff first. That's Ricardo's principle from economics. Always use the best stuff first. So that means over time, we have to use poorer and poorer grade resources. That means it's taking more and more energy to get your next ton of copper. If we go to a renewable world, we're going to have to use more and more materials, common ones like copper and exotic ones like indium and who knows, cobalt and what else. And so we have to grind up 10 times more stuff than we did in 1920. This is happening to everything that we're dealing with. It's the energy cost of depletion. Oil is going to cost more in the future because you have to use more energy to get it. Everything we have in our economy is based on oil. If the future of oil is how I think it will be, we're up the stream in our canoe without a paddle, and the waterfall is below us. We got to do something. So I think shifting to renewables is the only option. And I don't know if we can do it. I don't know if we have the materials. I don't know if we have the oil to make and move around the machines. If, as I think, oil becomes more expensive, there's going to be less and less energy available for the rest of society. And people are going to demand that they maintain their salaries, their retirement benefits, their health care. You got to squeeze all of that out of a smaller and smaller energy resource. Every time a politician says that he's going to make your life better by having more of this or more of that, think each time, well, how much energy is that? How much energy is that? And that, to me, makes the question of distribution, i.e. rich versus poor, much more important. How much energy are we going to have in the future, and who gets it? And what it means politically, as we see in the United States today, is that it makes the country harder and harder to govern. Politicians may not help, but the left thinks it's the right, and the right thinks it's the left. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with resources. People get used to this. They get used to the increase. Used to say in America, you're going to be richer than your parents. Remember that? Not true anymore.
It's possible that economic downturns centered on energy lie in our future, even with the adoption of renewables we see today. Decreased access to cheap fossil fuels early in this transitional period may also, ironically, impact our ability to address the symptoms of climate change.
The ocean is rising. Things are getting warmer. Well, they're trying to fix that sea rise with what? What do you think they use to try to fix it? Oil. To make barriers, to make levees, to keep the levees working. My God, every time I see a war and all this infrastructure destroyed by idiots with howitzers, and I'm thinking, my God, how much precious embodied energy are we destroying? If we're going to make some transition to a brave new world of renewable energy, because we're going to run out of the high-grade fossil fuels, then how are we going to do that?
Hard to imagine how much energy is harnessed in there.
Imagination is not necessary. The scale is readily quantifiable. We are presently generating 12.75 billion gigawatts per...
In science fiction, we're often presented with high-energy depictions of the future.
Energize.
Teleporters, replicators, phasers, and warp drive facilitate spacefaring adventures through a populous galaxy full of new life and new civilizations.
To boldly go where no one has gone before.
This is a hopeful, exciting vision for our future. But there's a problem. If it were possible to achieve these aspirations, wouldn't there be others in the universe who already advanced past energy scarcity into long-lived and prosperous civilizations that spread throughout the cosmos?
Live long and prosper.
Despite the size and age of the universe, we see no conclusive evidence of this, a problem known as the Fermi paradox.
I got a great graph, and it shows from 10,000 years in the past to 10,000 in the future. And here you've got a guy, a caveman, walking along, and then you have this big spike. And up here, there's a guy in a spacesuit. And then it comes down the other side. This is the history of our fossil fuels. And there you have a same caveman, more or less, walking along, except he's got a bow and arrow. Yeah, you might have only this window of 100 years, that you would be able to send out spacecraft with signals or send out radio waves that somebody might be able to intercept somewhere else. Who knows?